My name is Vance, and my job was to keep promises measurable. I built the service credit engine that lived under our master services agreements. The quiet machine that translated uptime, response time, and compliance attestation into dollars on a ledger. I drafted Schedule K, where the thresholds sat. I designed the escrow rails where credits posted without debate. When a control failed, the system paid before the apology email finished loading. People called it severe. I called it honest. Officially, I was Director of Support Economics. Unofficially, I was the attester of last resort. Every month, I signed the compliance certificate that kept our enterprise contracts in force. SOC 2 controls observed, ISO 27001 mapped, breach notifications nil, wage and hour compliance affirmed for roles named as control custodians. That last clause was mine. It closed a loophole I had once suffered under. The attester had to be free from coercion and paid above a published floor. If not, the certificate was void, and the engine converted the void into service credits across accounts with penalty multipliers. No executive loved this. They tolerated it because customers did. And customers paid us 9 figures for trust. I watched the son of the CEO rehearse his promotion speech through the glass of the boardroom. He wore confidence like a borrowed suit. I watched his father rehearse a smile. Raymond liked gestures. He liked proving points. We are lean, he would say, tapping the table. We are merit. The week before, he had asked me to make the attestation more symbolic. I declined. The next day, HR sent me a revised compensation letter. Effective immediately, my base became $1, pending role re-leveling. A temporary flourish, they said. A photo for the town hall. My badge still opened the server room. My name still sat on the certificate. The floor in Schedule K did not blink. I did what I always do. I read the contracts again. I wrote my notes with dates and page numbers. I checked that the engine's triggers remained bound to the compensation table and not to an org chart. I looked at the quiet lines of code that watched the clock. I breathed. The system is only as fair as it is indifferent to faces. If they insisted that I was replaceable, the math would tell them how much that belief cost. I did not raise my voice. I checked my pen. The next attestation was due at noon. They staged the announcement in the atrium under a banner that read, "The next chapter." I stood behind a row of ficus trees while cameras framed Raymond and his son. Ethan thanked the room for belief and speed. He said he would modernize the compliance function and eliminate ceremony. People clapped because a camera was watching. An hour earlier, HR had walked a single sheet to my desk and asked for my signature, acknowledging the $1 base. I initialed the receipt and slid the paper back into the folder. They waited for a reaction. I gave them a timestamp. At 11, legal asked whether the noon certificate would be ready. "It will be accurate," I said. They heard yes and walked away. I opened the governance portal and recorded an independence concern against my own role. The field was not a weapon. It was a mirror. Compensation below attester floor in Schedule K. Potential coercion through public demotion. Seeking cure, I typed. I attached the HR letter, the payroll delta from Workday, and the board memo that named Ethan, head of trust. The portal stamped the entry with a hash and filed it in the audit chain. My chest felt hollow, like someone had moved the walls of a room I knew well. I kept breathing. Systems respect sequence. Sequence respects evidence. At 11:43, Ethan came to my desk with a pen and a cameraman in tow. He grinned for a thumbnail. "Quick sign so we can send the customer email before lunch," he said. He placed the certificate on the keyboard. The line that mattered was near the bottom. I attest that I am independent, fully paid according to the wage floor specified in Schedule K, and free from undue influence. I lifted the page so the light caught the watermark. "I will sign what is true," I said. The cameraman lowered the lens. Ethan's smile held a second too long. When he spoke again, the tone was practiced. "Then, by my authority as head of trust, I will attest as acting officer." He thought titles were keys. He had not read the locks. The attester role in the MSAs was not a job title. It was a control. The control required tenure, certification, and independence. It named me explicitly for the first year of each renewal and allowed substitution only by mutual customer consent. We had negotiated that after a vendor lied to us and then hid behind a different signature. Every acting claim was void unless customers countersigned. That clause had paid for itself the day it was written. I told Ethan to send the customer substitution letter if he wished. He read the line and blinked. In the pause, I felt the sting of being made into a prop. It crested and broke. I set the certificate back where he had placed it. Noon approached. I watched the engine's heartbeat in the admin console. At 12, the attestation field would read null. The system would evaluate the null against the floor and independence rules. If non-compliant, credits would begin accruing account by account, product by product, while the reserve waterfall routed cash from provision to payable. When customers logged in, they would see credits posting under uncured attestation lapse, time-coded to the minute. It would look like a fire sale. It was not revenge. It was math executing a covenant. At 12:01, my inbox filled with alerts. Attestation invalid. Credits posting. The numbers loaded next. We carried 180 enterprise MSAs. The weighted monthly recurring revenue for those accounts was just under $200 million. The penalty formula in Schedule K multiplied a fraction of monthly fees by each hour of noncompliance, with a step up at hour 24. It was $900,000 an hour at baseline. Legal called. Finance called. Raymond texted a single word: fix. I wrote 2 words back: cure required. By 12:10, customers were replying to the automatic notices that my engine had sent from the escrow service. Some asked if there had been a breach. I told the truth. No breach. Independence lapse by compensation below attester floor. Cure in progress. One of our largest clients, a hospital network, forwarded the clause to their counsel and copied me. Thank you for transparency, their GC wrote. We rely on your attester's independence because lives rely on the data. Paul, I felt my hand steady. The work had always been about this. Not the optics, the promise. At 12:15, Ethan and Raymond arrived together, trailed by the CFO and the head of HR. They wanted a room. I led them to the small conference by the loading dock. Raymond spoke first. He called the situation a misunderstanding. He said the pay change was ceremonial and would be reversed. He asked whether I could sign now and let payroll catch up later. I slid the HR letter across the table. The system binds to the ledger, not intentions, I said. The cure is to restore compliance, and if you want substitution, to obtain customer consent. The CFO rubbed his forehead. He knew what the reserve waterfall would do to cash. He had been in the room when I explained it during the last restructuring. He looked down at his phone, watching money turn into apologies. Ethan tried another angle. He said I was being rigid. He said the company needed flexibility to move fast. He called my clause unfriendly. I did not raise my voice. It keeps us honest, I said. It keeps me honest. It keeps you safe. The head of HR asked whether I would withdraw the independence concern from the portal. I told her I could annotate it with the cure if and when it landed on the ledger. Raymond's jaw set. His pride was a staircase he kept trying to climb 2 steps at a time. He asked what I wanted. I wanted the truth to be visible. I wanted the policy respected. I wanted the camera to show something real. He pushed the certificate toward me again. The pen felt heavy. I could have signed and pretended nothing had happened. The engine would have stopped. The money would have stayed. My title would have been a ribbon. I thought of the first time a company had told me my pay was a joke but my signature was serious. I thought of the analyst who had tried to warn a hospital before a defect reached a ventilator. I placed the pen down. You cut my base to $1 and filmed it, I said. You named your son to my control and told customers we skipped ceremony. The system heard you. The cure is not my handwriting. It is your integrity on the ledger. Raymond exhaled through his nose, a small, contained storm. He turned to the CFO. How bad by end of day? The CFO did not cushion it. North of $6 million if we miss the hour. If we cross 24, the multiplier hits. If customers elect cash instead of credits, the reserve is short by quarter close. Raymond nodded once, as if agreeing with a person he had never met. He told HR to reverse the comp immediately. He told legal to draft the substitution requests. He told Ethan to apologize to camera. He looked at me and searched for anger he could fight. I gave him a page number instead. He had cut my pay to prove a point. The point was proving him. The first hour burned like a flare and then settled into a steady bleed. I watched the ledger not only for dollars, but for patterns, the way a cardiologist reads a monitor for rhythm. Credits were heaviest in healthcare, then finance, then the public sector. That told me which counsel would call next and what language they would need. The injustice was no longer a headline about a pay cut. It was a structural betrayal of the covenant I had written to protect them from gestures. The $1 move did not humiliate me. It wounded the control. The scope widened with every accrual report. I felt anger rise like heat and then convert into plans. Emotion is fuel. It should not be the driver. I opened the playbook I built for breach simulation and repurposed it for truth. Step 1 was evidence integrity. I exported the payroll journal that showed the $1 base and wrote a checksum beside it. I pulled the HR letter, the promotion memo, the video still of Ethan asking for a ceremonial signature. I took a snapshot of the governance portal with the independence concern logged and the hash visible. I packaged them into a single record of facts and stored it in the audit vault with red rights for legal, internal audit, and the audit committee chair. I wrote an executive summary in plain language. We tripped our own control. Cure is mechanical. Root cause is executive interference with an independence requirement. Recommended remediation is structural. I included the per-hour exposure, the 24-hour multiplier, and the pro forma cash effect if 50% of customers elected cash rather than credits. Then I locked the folder and sent the link. If someone looked for a scapegoat, they would find a clock and a mirror. Step 2 was customer stabilization. I sorted our enterprise list by reliance on our attestation for regulatory filings. Hospitals first, then banks, then government clients, with data residency clauses. I drafted a template that did not spin. Your credits are posting according to Schedule K. There is no security incident. The attester independence threshold was breached by an internal compensation action. We are curing on the ledger. I will not sign until the cure is verifiable. I will attest when independent. You may elect credits or cash. I added a line inviting their counsel to a call with our audit committee chair. I scheduled 3 calls and sent calendar holds with agenda lines and clause numbers. I copied our external auditor. The point was to make light and heat both. Step 3 was strategy for governance reform. A signature would stop the meter but change nothing. The only cure I could live with was a charter that outlived this hour. I wrote a draft resolution to create an Office of Attestation reporting to the Audit Committee, with its own budget, its own counsel, and a compensation floor pegged to market percentiles, not executive whim. I defined the attester role as a trustee under deed, not a manager under an org chart. I bound the signing keys for compliance certificates to a 2-key rule, the attester and the audit committee chair together. I added a substitution process that required not only customer consent, but a seasoning period, and a demonstration of competence recorded as objective evidence. I wrote a prohibition on public theatrics that could be seen as coercion. I tied the attestation to change management gates so launches could not bypass the control by renaming it. I drafted language for a public statement to customers that admitted the failure and described the fix without vanity. Then I printed the resolution and placed it next to the certificate. Step 4 was personal risk and leverage. I had to assume someone would suggest that I had weaponized the engine. I documented the triggers and the dates they were approved by the board 2 years ago. I pulled the board minutes where Raymond praised the severity because it signaled seriousness to the market. I attached the email where legal told me never to soften the wage floor language. I listed the names of the customers who had asked for that clause. I put my resignation letter in a folder, unsigned, with a second letter that proposed a conversion from employee to independent trustee for an interim period of 90 days. The trustee letter included indemnification, a fixed scope, and a clear exit. If they wanted my signature as a symbol, they could not treat the role like a prop again. I was not bargaining for money. I was buying guarantees for the control. Step 5 was numbers. Pride does not read paragraphs. It listens to ceilings. I built a one-page model with 3 scenarios: immediate cure, cure within 3 hours, cure after 24. I showed reserve impact, cash shortfall by quarter end, debt covenant headroom, and reputational risk scored against our risk taxonomy. I put the $900,000 per hour at the top right in a font no one could misread. I put customer quotes on the left. We rely on your attester's independence because lives rely on the data. It was not theater. It was a scale, with money on one side and meaning on the other, balanced by structure. Only then did I let myself sit still. My hands were steady. The door to the loading dock room was thin. I could hear hurried voices in the corridor, the sound of urgency discovering process. I rehearsed what I would say to the audit committee chair. Facts first, then the cure, then the ask. I would not insult him with euphemisms. I would not give Raymond an enemy to fight in place of the rule he had broken. I would put the certificate where the resolution could touch it. I would sign when the ledger told the truth. If they agreed to the charter, I would stay to build it, and then step aside so the next attester could inherit a structure, not a spotlight. If they refused, the law and the contracts would keep speaking until someone who cared more about promises than poses took the pen. At 12:30, I dialed the audit committee chair from the loading dock room and shared my screen. Priya Narang had the habit of reading with a pencil, even on video. She let me walk through the record of facts without interruption. Payroll delta. HR letter. Promotion memo. The portal hash. The clause in Schedule K. The per-hour exposure. When she finally spoke, it was a full sentence that felt like a gavel. We will treat this as a control failure with executive cause. Convene an emergency session. Do not sign until I say the cure is complete on the ledger. She invited our external auditor to the bridge and told legal to prepare a board resolution in the language of my draft. She did not ask how we got here. She asked how we leave differently. We reconvened at 1. People joined from glass offices, cars, and a corner of the cafeteria. I kept the model on slide 1 and the clause text on slide 2. The auditor confirmed the portal hash and the timestamps. HR confirmed that Workday had processed a reversal, but that the payroll run would hit the general ledger at 1:45. Cure lands when the ledger reflects it, not when Workday promises it, Priya said. The CFO nodded and pulled the AP clerk into the call to bypass the batch and post a manual journal entry with an audit trail, debit reserve for credits, credit compensation accrual with narrative, attester floor restoration, I said. He typed the narrative verbatim. I watched the attestation console for the only number that mattered. At 1:43, the comp floor flag flipped from red to green. The independence concern remained open but annotated. The engine had not yet seen an attestation. The penalty clock still ran. Priya moved us to the structure. She read the resolution clause by clause. Create an Office of Attestation reporting to the committee. Define the attester as a trustee under deed. Peg compensation to the 75th percentile of market with automatic adjustment. Bind certificate signing to a 2-key rule between the trustee and the committee chair. Forbid public acts that could be construed as coercion. Require a seasoning period and objective evidence for any successor. Publish a customer letter that admits the lapse, explains the cure, and outlines the reform. She asked me to confirm that this was the charter I could sign under. I said yes. She asked Raymond whether he objected. He stared at the camera and said, no. She did not thank him. She asked legal to put the deed in front of a notary within the hour. At 2, we ran the key ceremony. Our HSM cluster already stored the private key for compliance certificates under FIPS 140 controls with quorum approval. We rotated the key and built a cosign policy. Both my token and Priya's token required within a 5-minute window, each on separate workstations, both sessions recorded. The auditor watched the PKCS logs and read out the key identifier. I entered my passphrase and touched the key. Priya did the same on her end. The HSM returned, ready. The console showed a new attestation template with the charter number at the bottom. I typed the truth, controls observed. Wage and hour compliance affirmed. Attester independent and paid above the floor. Cure posted to the ledger at 1343. Independence concern annotated with corrective action. Charter creation and deed. Priya reviewed each line slowly. Sign, she said. We touched our keys. The certificate sealed. The engine stopped the meter on the next heartbeat. A banner appeared in the customer portal. Attestation restored at 1407. Credits accrued during the lapse remain in your account. You may elect application or cash. Finance exhaled through their microphones. The CFO pinged me privately. We will make it through the quarter, he wrote. We will also change. HR posted the deed and the resolution to the governance site and replaced the promotion video with a plain text apology. Ethan recorded a new message without slogans. He read the charter aloud. It landed better than anything he had improvised. I took the customer calls with the same calm I use in incident reviews. The Hospital Networks Council thanked us for the clean record. We will take credits and direct a portion to training on your side, she said. A bank asked whether they could rely on the new 2-key rule for their own due diligence. I sent them the key ceremony minutes, the key identifier, and the auditor's letter. A government client asked whether the attester could be removed by the CEO, only by the committee, with cause, under the deed, I answered. Silence. Then a short laugh. Good. Raymond asked to meet in person. We sat in the smallest room again, this time with no camera. He told me he had meant the pay cut as a statement about humility. He admitted that the statement had landed as humiliation. He said he did not understand the floor clause until it cost him $900,000 an hour. I told him the clause had not cost him anything. The clause had priced his choice. He was quiet for a moment in a way I had not seen. Then he asked what I needed to stay. I slid the trustee letter across the table. 90 days, a defined scope, indemnification and the authority to stand the Office of Attestation up with process and people. I named a successor profile, not a person. He read without flinching. He signed. By 5, the Office of Attestation had a budget line, a counsel on retainer, and a hiring requisition for 2 analysts who would live in the evidence. Legal sent substitution requests to customers for the future state and received replies that used the word relieved. The engine's ledger settled into stillness. The reserve waterfall closed. The credits remained as a ledger of a lesson learned in public. The building felt different, as if the air itself had been made measurable. I walked past the banner in the atrium and watched someone take it down. The next chapter had been written, not by a speech, by a structure. The evening brought the second storm, not customers this time, owners. Priya set a special board session at 6, with the external auditor present and the general counsel sworn to read minutes aloud. I shared my 1-page model and the deed. The chair of compensation joined to discuss clawbacks. Raymond arrived on mute and stayed that way for the first 10 minutes. Ethan sat beside him, eyes down. The investor relations lead patched in our largest outside holder, an analyst known for calling soft talk attacks. He wanted what markets always want: certainty, priced and dated. I began with facts. The lapse lasted from 1201 to 1407. The engine accrued credits at $900,000 an hour, totaling $1,890,000. 58% of customers elected credits. 42% elected cash. The reserve covered the cash immediately with a draw we had already modeled. No system was breached. No data was lost. The failure was a governance act, not a technical one. It was visible, timed, and cured on the ledger. I kept my voice level. Priya let the silence that followed do some of the work. The analyst asked one question: what prevents this from happening again when the camera leaves? I shared my screen and walked him through the deed line by line. The Office of Attestation exists under the Audit Committee. The attester is a trustee, not an employee. The wage floor ties to market data and adjusts automatically. The certificate requires 2 keys held by independent parties, recorded by the HSM with quorum and immutable logs. Substitution takes customer consent, seasoning, and objective evidence of competence. Public theatrics that could coerce are prohibited by policy and sanctionable by the board. I placed the key ceremony minutes on the screen and read the identifier. He did not congratulate me. He said, "That is cost well spent," and turned to the board. Now address tone at the top. Priya moved briskly. She proposed a formal censure of executive interference with the control. She proposed a clawback of compensation tied to the day's misstatement of independence in customer-facing materials. She proposed removing compliance and audit from the CEO's span of control. She proposed reassigning Ethan to a role without authority over attestations, with a development plan measured by deliverables, not titles. She proposed that I serve the 90-day trustee term to stand up the office and name 3 qualified candidates, then step away at the end by design. She asked for a vote. Hands went up on video one by one. Raymond raised his last. The motion carried. The public part followed. We issued a statement written in the language of contracts, not spin. We admitted the lapse. We explained the cure. We published the deed. We apologized without a comma of excuse. Investor Relations scheduled a morning call and released the figures. The press asked whether this was a palace drama. I brought them back to clauses. We tripped at control. We showed you the clock. We built a lock. The hospital network's GC posted a note on a professional forum praising the transparency, and I watched the sentiment line tilt. Trust does not love perfection. It respects visible correction. Inside, the work turned from crisis to craft. I interviewed candidates for the successor trustee. I looked for the trait that cannot be coached: a refusal to blink when a fact matters. I found it in a woman from a payments company who had once refused to sign a quarterly 302 until a revenue cutoff adjustment hit the general ledger. Her name was Maya Chen. She brought her own pen and a notebook striped with dates and citations. I let her study the engine, the HSM policy, the deed, the portal, and the customer letters. She asked how it felt to be used as a prop. I told her it felt like gravity reversed for a moment and then corrected itself. She nodded. She said gravity is a good teacher. She passed every test we built. The last confrontation was quiet and human. Raymond came to my office at 9, when the building was a belly of lights and reflections. He said he would not forget how the meter made the cost of a gesture visible. He said he had treated independence like a slogan. He asked whether I could see a way forward where he learned in public without being humiliated in it. I told him that humility requires measurement, not theater. It would look like him reading minutes before he read scripts. It would sound like him asking the attester what the ledger said and waiting for the answer before calling cameras. He absorbed it like someone holding a cold coin. The morning after, the market opened and we did not fall apart. The stock dipped and then found its level. The analyst who had asked the hard question wrote a note that used the phrase, "governance upgrade." Customers forwarded our deed to their own boards as an example of how to bind trust to structure. Ethan sent me a thank you message that did not ask me to spare him. He wrote that he had learned which parts of a job should never be promoted. I believed him enough to wish him well in a role where he could not harm a control. I signed one last certificate at the 2-key console with Priya and watched Maya shadow each step. Then I took my hand off the guardrail and let the engine hum in someone else's care. Victory did not feel like triumph. It felt like a lock clicking home. It felt like the edge of a cliff moving back 3 feet where others could walk. It felt like the meter at 0, not because I yielded, but because the ledger now defended itself. The 90 days passed like measured steps. I wrote runbooks instead of speeches. I mapped every control to evidence. Every evidence to a system of record, and every exception to a plain sentence that began with a date. I gave Maya the keys by teaching her how to hold them. We rehearsed failure on purpose. We pulled her token and watched the HSM refuse the seal. We misposted a mock journal entry and waited for the console to flag the mismatch. We ran a drill where a camera and a complement tried to hurry her hand. She did not hurry. I watched her learn to trust the ledger more than faces, and I felt a knot loosen that I had carried so long I mistook it for bone. I closed loops I had once left to habit. We built an attestation calendar tied to payroll cutoffs and board meetings so compliance lived on time, not on mood. We codified a rotation where 2 analysts presented facts monthly to the audit committee, not to executive staff. We wrote a customer-facing how we sign page with the deed number, the key identifier, and the last 5 attestation hashes. We opened a channel where any employee could flag pressure on a control and get a case number by return. Small, visible promises reduced the room available for theater. When hallway talk met the policy won. On my last day as trustee, Priya convened a short session. The minutes recorded what mattered. The Office of Attestation stood up, funded, and staffed. The deed filed. The successor named and seasoned. The engine audited, the reserves reconciled, the customer letters closed. We ran the 2-key ceremony one more time with Maya as signer and me as witness. The HSM wrote a new identifier. The portal stamped a new hash. Priya set her pencil down and set a line that will outlive all of us. We will keep promises measurable. I signed my final annotation and stepped back so the system could breathe without me in the room. The aftermath reached me in small notes. The hospital network sent a thank you card that mentioned a child who went home the week our attestation returned. A junior engineer wrote that she had used our public deed to argue for a code review policy in her team and won. The analyst who had grilled us sent 3 words by email, met expectations finally. Ethan forwarded a draft for a training module called Independence is Not a Vibe, and asked if he could cite our drill scripts. I said yes. Raymond began arriving early to sit through audit first, operations second. He learned to ask, "What does the ledger say?" before he reached for a camera. Growth can be quiet if you let it. I did not stay for the applause. I formed a small practice with a plain name and a narrow mission. Design covenant engines and the charters that keep them honest. I price my time in pages, not hours. I will help a company only if it will bind itself in writing to treat independence as a control, not a costume. The first client was a clinic with a brave CFO and a tired IT lead. We wrote a floor clause. We drew a 2-key diagram on a whiteboard. When their lawyer asked why the floor was so explicit, I told her the story of a $1 paycheck and a $900,000 clock. She did not need another sentence. The lesson is not complicated. Respect is cheaper than repair. Competence is not a line item to shave for effect. Structures beat slogans because structures survive the room. If you treat a person as a prop, a meter will eventually count the cost for you in units you cannot spin. If you honor the craft and the clause, the meter sleeps, customers exhale, and work becomes quieter and deeper. I left the building with my notebook lighter than when I arrived. The deed sat where anyone could read it. The lock clicked and held. The engine hummed without my name. Somewhere a child breathed easier. A nurse logged in, a number matched a promise, and the clock stayed at 0.